everyone, and welcome to our new course. This course is French for Beginners, and it's going to be the first in a new series that we are going to start today, which is about the French language. So, these courses are basically for beginners, and also if you're already familiar with the French language and want to refresh your knowledge, this course is also for you. At the end of this course, you should expect to learn the French alphabet and its pronunciation. So this is going to be our first lesson today. But of course, since you're already in this course, you already know the importance of French, but I'm just going to highlight it some more because since knowing one language nowadays is not enough, and due to the huge importance of French, which is one of the six most widely spoken languages in the world and found in all five continents, also about 29 countries use French as an official language. And also among a lot of other reasons such as travel and work, etc. But of course, you already know that. I'm just giving you some motivation before we start our new course. So let's get started. Let's learn French. So in this course, of course, we're gonna cover the basics first. And while going through the series of the next courses, including this one, we're gonna get to reading, writing, understanding different vocabulary, and eventually speaking in the French pronunciation. The French alphabet is based on Latin alphabet, which means that it shares the same alphabet with English, but with different sounds. So basically, they are the same 26 letters, which are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, G, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. So basically, it's the same alphabet, which is the Latin alphabet. It's based on it, but the difference is the pronunciation. So, how do we pronounce the French alphabet? So, I have divided the different letters into different categories based on how they are pronounced. So, the first category is gonna be these letters, and what specifies them is that their pronunciation has the sound e after the letter. So, for example, the letter B is gonna have the pronunciation B. Okay, you see, it's gonna be B. The letter C is gonna be C. The letter D is gonna be D. The letter G is gonna be G. The letter P is gonna be P. The letter T is gonna be T. And the letter V is gonna be V. So to recap, these letters are the first category, which are the letters that have the pronunciation E after the letter. We move on to our second category, which has the sound E before the letter. Now you probably can't distinguish the difference between the sound E and E, but we will talk about that in a specific chapter in this lesson later on. So basically, what we're saying now in this second category, we're gonna have the sound E before the letter. So it's gonna be F, M for the letter M, N for the letter N, L for the letter L, and S for the letter S. And I've highlighted the letter R in red because this letter has a specific and special pronunciation in French. So the letter R is going to be pronounced as R. Okay, so it's going to be R. R. So I've highlighted this one in red since it has a different pronunciation than in English. But as you've already maybe noticed that the other letters are pronounced the same in French in this category, such as F, M, N, L, and S. And once again, second time, the letter R is gonna be R. Okay, so now we move on to our third category, which is a group of letters that doesn't have a general rule for all of them. Okay, so this is our third category that includes the letters, for example, A, it's gonna be A in French. The letter O is gonna be O. The letter E is gonna be E. So the letter E is gonna be E. The letter U is gonna be U. The letter U is gonna be U. The letter I is gonna be E. So now, if you've noticed the difference in the French and English language between the letters E and I, they're gonna be, for the letter E, it's gonna be E. For the letter I, it's gonna be E. I know this is a little bit confusing, but don't worry, you'll get there faster than you think. So one more time, for the letter E, it's gonna be E, and for the letter I, it's gonna be E. So we move on. The letter K is gonna be K. The letter Q is gonna be Q. And finally, for the letter J, it's gonna be J. It's gonna be J. We move on to our next category, which is our final category, category 4, which includes these letters that are somewhat special. So we start with our first letter, which is gonna be the letter H. It's gonna be Ash. So for the letter H, it's gonna be Ash. We move on to the next. The W, you see in English language, it's called double U. In the French language, it's gonna be called double V. So if we translate that into the French pronunciation for the letter V that we've already told, it's gonna be double V. So the whole letter is gonna be called double V. Okay, we move on to the letter X. It's gonna be X. So for X, it's gonna be X. For the letter Y, it's gonna be Y. Y. And for our final letter, which is the letter Z, it's gonna be Z. So basically, this is the same. The letter Z is gonna be Z. And also just to highlight that there's of course the vowels, which are A, O, E, U, Y, and I. And I'm gonna say those once again in French so you can practice what we just learned. So they are gonna be A, O, E, U, Y, and finally E. So these are the vowels in the French alphabet, and all other letters are consonants. So now to learn the letters we just learned how to pronounce in a more advanced way, we've created the syllabic method. So basically what we're gonna do is that we're gonna pronounce different letters with the following letters A, O, U, I, and E. Because basically most of the times after a consonant we're gonna have the vowels. So these are the mostly used in any word you want to say. So this is gonna be our start to learn the French pronunciation. So again, I'm just gonna say the letters in French, the ones that we're gonna use in this table. They're gonna be B, C, D, F, G, H. And we're gonna use those with the letters A, O, U, I, and E. So now let's start with our first letter. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read the whole line and feel free to pause and rehearse it as many times as you want. So for the first letter, which is gonna be B, which is B, it's gonna be pronounced in French ba, bo, bu, bi, and b. As you can see, I've put the U column in bold just to highlight the difference in the pronunciation with the letter U in French. So once again, with the letter B and U in French, it's gonna be B, and letter U is gonna be pronounced bu. Once again, bu. So now we are going to move on to our next letter, which is the letter C. In French, it's gonna be C. We're gonna spell it or pronounce it Ka, Ko, and Ku. So with the letter C or C, it's gonna be pronounced as a K sound. So it's gonna be Ka, Ko, and Ku. But I've marked the last two in red to highlight that with these letters, the I and E, or E and E in French, it's gonna be pronounced C and S. If this is too confusing for you now, don't mind it. We have a special chapter for this letter and how it's pronounced with different other letters. So for now, just remember that in general, we pronounce the letter C as a K sound. We move on to the letter D, which is D. It's gonna be pronounced da, do, du, di, and de. We move on to the letter F, which is F in French. It's gonna be fa, fo, fu, fi, and fe. We move on to the G letter, which is gonna be G sound. So it's gonna be ga, go, gu. And once again, we have a special pronunciation for the letter G in French with some letters that we're gonna talk about. So these in red are gonna be pronounced as a J and je. Once again, we have a special chapter for this one, but I had to mention it here just so I wouldn't give you wrong information. If you feel this is too confusing, just skip these two letters and wait till we get to their special chapter later on in this lesson. And our final letter is gonna be the letter H, which is ash. It's gonna be pronounced ha, ho, hu, he, and hu. So this is our first table. Let's move on to the next. Okay, so now we are gonna start with our second table, which is gonna have the letters J, K, L, M, and N, which are in French J, K, L, M, and N. So for the letter J, it's gonna be Ja, Jo, Ju, J, and Je. For the letter K or K in French, it's gonna be Ka, Ko, Q, Ki, and K. For the letter L, it's gonna be La, Lo, Lu, Li, and Le. For the letter M, it's gonna be Ma, Mo, Mu, Mi, and M. For the letter N, it's gonna be Na, No, Nu, Ni, and N. Like I said before, feel free to pause the video for each letter and do each syllable by its own. So basically, once again, you can realize that there are many syllables that have no differences with the English languages, but the most important is to distinguish the letter U, which is U. So it's going to be, I'm going to read the whole column. It's going to be Ju, Ku, Lu, Mu, and Nu. Also, the difference between the I and E, which are in French respectively, E and E. Okay, so this is our second table. Let's move on to the next. So now this is our third table, which is gonna have the letters P, Q, R, S, and T, which are in French P, Q, R, S, and T. So for the letter P, it's gonna be Pa, Po, Pu, Pi, and P. For the letter Q, which is Q, it's gonna be Ka, Ko, Ku, Ki, and K. For the letter R, which is once again, take notes and really see the difference here. The letter R in French is R, so it's gonna be pronounced Ra, Ro, Ru, Ri, and R. I'm gonna say it one more time. Ra, Ro, Ru, Ri, and R. Feel free to do this once, twice, and 3 times till you master the difference. This is exactly the French pronunciation and the French accent if you really want to get there. So now let's move on to the letter S, which is gonna be sa, so, su, si, and se. And at last, the letter T is gonna be ta, to, tu, ti, and tu. So this is our third table. Let's move on to the next. Now, let's begin with our last table, which is gonna have the letters V, W, X, Y, and Z, which are in French the letters V, W, X, Y, and Z. So let's start with the letter V. It's gonna be va, vo, vu, vi, and v. We move on to the letter W, which is gonna be W. It's gonna be wa, wo, wu, we, and w. We move on to the letter X. It's gonna be za, zo, zu, xi, and xu. We move on to the letter Y, which is Y. It's gonna be ya, yo, you, yi, and you. And at last, our last letter, which is Z, it's gonna be za, zo, zu, zi, and z. So now we are done with our tables, and as you can see, I have reminded you the pronunciation of each of the letters individually in French, and we learned all the syllables that we're gonna later use in our words and everything else. So let's move on to the okay. So now let's do a practice for the syllables that we just learned. So let's take the first one, which is gonna be ba na nu. Ba na nu. So altogether it's gonna be like banana, which is a banana. Don't worry about the vocabulary now. We are gonna have so much more things to learn, but if you're a fast learner, you can get this as a bonus. So the second one is gonna be ça me dit. Ça me dit. Altogether, it's gonna be samedi, which is Saturday. Again, ignore this. It's not this time to learn these, but this is just for the few of you that might appreciate this. If not, just skip it. The third one is gonna be ma, 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 ma. The fourth is gonna be mo, to, mo, to. The next is do, 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 do. The next is gonna be pa, 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 pa. We move on. Do, mi, no. Do, mi, no. We move on. Ça, la, de. Ça, la, de. We move on. Pro. You can see how the R is pronounced. Pro, me, na, de. Pro, me, na, de. We move on. Livre, livre. And our last one. Lu, ne, lu, ne. Also, we continue with another set of syllables to practice. So we start with je peux, je peux. Next, ta bleu, ta bleu. Next, porte, porte. Next, pas, ro, le, pas, ro, le. Next, ka, ma, ra, de. If you notice, we said ka and not sa. We mentioned this in the table, and as I said, we are gonna talk more about this in a special chapter. We move on. Trop, po, li, ne. Trop, po, li, ne. Next, tar, ti, ne. Tar, ti, ne. Next, po, li, se. Po, li, se. Next, ro, be. Ro, be. Next, os. Os. So this is the reverse of the syllables we learned, but it's basically the same thing. So it's gonna be os, not so. So that's obvious. Next, ga, ra, je. Can you see the difference between the first? It's gonna be ga, and then the last is gonna be je. Also, we talked about this in the table, but also we have a special chapter for this. So for now, it's gonna be ga, ra, je. And for our last one, it's gonna be ra, dio, ra, di, o. So ra, di, o. All together, it's gonna be ra, dio. Okay, so that's it with our practice. Let's move on to whatever we're gonna learn next. Okay, so now we're gonna start talking about different pronunciations of the letter C, which is C. So like we said, the letter C is pronounced as a K when it's before consonants or consonants. Okay, so for example, let's take the first example. Clôture. Clôture. The next, lecture. Lecture. And the last one, crise. Crise. Don't worry about the z sound. We will talk about this later. But for the moment, just focus on the cri. Also, the letter C is pronounced as a K in front of three other letters, which are vowels, which are A, O, and U, which are in French A, O, and U. So let's give some examples. It's gonna be Ka, na, da, ka, na, da. The next, ko, m, ko, m. The next, culture. Culture. The next, cartable. Cartable. And the last one, cultive. Cultive. Let's see other pronunciations of the letter C. So it's pronounced as an S in front of three letters, which are E, I, and Y, which are in French E, I, E, Y. E, I, and Y. Let's give some examples. So it's gonna be cerise, cerise. Also, skip the z for now. Just focus on the S sound. The next, cirque, cirque. Also, just focus on the S sound. Don't worry about the K. We'll talk about all of these later on. Just focus on the goal of each chapter. So it's going to be sir. The next, sai in English. It's going to be in French, si. So it's going to be si, cleux. Si, cleux. The next, ce, la. Ce, la. And the last, me, na, ce. Me, na, ce. Also, one last piece of information regarding the S, which is gonna be the letter C is pronounced as an S before A and O and U. If you can remember, we just said that it's pronounced as a K in front of these three letters, with an exception when we put this small uh, small piece under the C, which is called in French C, C. When we have this, is actually we want to pronounce the sound S in front of these letters, which is usually a K, but we want to pronounce it as an S. So we put this CD, so it becomes a CD, and it's pronounced such as, let's get some examples, ça. The next one, le son. Le son. Next, reçu. reçu. And the last, garçon, garçon. Also here, keep in mind that the G is pronounced as a G sound, so it's gonna be garçon. Also, we're gonna talk about the G in the next chapter, but for now, just remember these three cases. The first is that the letter C is pronounced as a K in front before consonants and A, O, and U. It's pronounced as an S sound in front of before E, I, and Y. And lastly, the exception is it's pronounced as an S sound before A, O, and U when we have the C, CD. So now let's do some practice regarding what we just learned. Let's take the first word. So it's gonna be C, clu, re. So the first is an S sound because it has the Y after it, so it's gonna be C. The next one is gonna be K because it has the L after it, which is a consonant. So it's gonna be C, clu, re. Let's take the other word. La, Q, ne. It's gonna be a K since it has a U after it. So it's gonna be la, Q, ne. Let's go to the third. Co, de. Co, de. As we said, it's a K before the O. We move on. Citron. Citron. It's a C before the I. We move on. Sa. Like we said, normally in front of an A, before the A, it's a K sound. But since we have the CCD, it will be sa. And for our last word, it's gonna be cirque. Cirque. Feel free to do this practice multiple times so you can really master the different pronunciations of the letter. Now we are going to talk about the different pronunciations of the letter G. So the letter G is pronounced with a G sound before consonant, which is consonants. So it's going to be a G, and also when it's before the letters A, O, and U. So it's basically the same rule with the letter C before consonants and A, O, and U. So let's do some examples when it's before a consonant. The first example is going to be ag, ra, feu. Ag, ra, feu. Let's take the second one. Gris, peu. Gris, peu. The next. Tigre. Tigre. And our last one. Ag, ru, me. Ag, ru, me. Okay, so also it's the sound G before A and O and U. So it's gonna be gare de, gare de. The next is frigo, frigo. Garçon, garçon. Also you can see the CCD, that's why we said son. And to our last, it's gonna be rigolo, rigolo. So one last time, the G, the G, it's the G sound before the consonants and before A, O, and U. But the letter G is pronounced as a J before three letters which are E, I, and Y, which is in French E, I, and Y. So it's gonna sound like the first example, girafe, girafe. The next example is large, large. Next, argileux, argileux. And the last, gymnaste, gymnaste. As you may have noticed so far, I have put all of the words in the form of syllables. That way you can still practice what we learned at our first chapters, so you will keep practicing while learning new stuff. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about our last rule for the letter G. So it's when the letter G is before the letters E, I, and Y. Usually we pronounce it with the sound J, like we just said. But when we want to pronounce it as a G sound in front of before these three letters, we add a U after the G. So let's take some examples. The first one is gonna be guitar, guitar. The next is gonna be drague, drague. The next figue, figue. And our last is gonna be guide, guide. So just remember from this that the letter G is pronounced as a G sound before consonants A, O, and U. It's pronounced as a G sound before the three letters E, I, and Y. But if we want it as a G sound, we add a U after the G. Let's do some practice regarding what we just learned about the letter G. So for our first word, it's gonna be gorge, gorge. The next one is gonna be agir, agir. The next is gonna be garage, garage. The next one is gonna be bigue, bigue. You see, when we have the letter E, it's supposed to be a G sound, but we added the U, so it's gonna be bigue. The next is gonna be glace, glace. The next is gros te, gros te. The next is givre, givre. The next is gonna be gel, gel. The next is guise, guise. And to our last is arginine, arginine. Also, feel free to do this multiple times so you can really master the different pronunciations. Now we are going to talk about the different pronunciations of the letter S. So, the letter S is pronounced as a S in general. Examples: sac, mask, sami. You see, it's the sound S. But the exception is if it's situated between two vowels, we pronounce it as a Z sound. So, again, if the S is between two vowels, which I put again here, it's gonna be pronounced as a Z sound. Let's see some examples. Va, Z. You see the S, it's between the A and the I and the E. So it's gonna be va, Z. Let's move on to the next. Va, li, Z. Va, li, Z. We move on to the next. Cerise. Cerise. And to our last, it's gonna be case. Case. But there's a one last piece of information. When the letter S is between two vowels, but we want to pronounce it as the sound S, we double it. So let's see the first example. It's gonna be classe. So if it was one S, it would have been pronounced as a Z since it's between A and E, but we want it as a S sound. So it's gonna be classe, chasse. We're gonna talk about the sha later. Don't worry about this, just focus on the double S when we want to pronounce it as an S sound between two vowels. Let's continue. Tissu, tissu. And to our last, it's gonna be gros se, gros se. Let's do some practice regarding what we just learned. So the first one's gonna be ruse, ruse, since the S is between two vowels. But as you can see in the second example, we want to pronounce it as an S, so we put a double S, so it's gonna be ruse, ruse. We move on to the third, ça me dit, ça me dit. The next is gonna be ta se, ta se. We move on, cro se, cro se. The next is a qui ze, a qui ze, since the S is between the I and the E. And to our last, it's gonna be beau se, beau se. So now we are gonna start a new thing, which is the accent, which is the accent in French. It's basically this small line which is written on top of a letter, which changes the way that we pronounce it. So first, we're gonna talk about accent aigu, which is the um, light accent, and this accent, the aigu, is only put on the letter E, while the other one that we're gonna talk about in the next chapter, it's gonna be an accent that's put usually on all of the vowels. So now let's keep this till later. Let's start talking about this one. So basically, l'accent aigu, which is this small line that we draw from the left to the right, from down to up. Okay, if you notice it, if we want to write it from left to right, it's from the lower side to the upper side. So basically, when you see the E or the letter E with this accent, it's gonna be pronounced as E. Okay, so let's see some examples really quickly. École, école. The next one, canapé, canapé. And you can see we said ka, and with the one before we said ko. These are reminders from the chapters we finished. The next is gonna be côté, côté. The next is gonna be bébé. The next, café, café. The next is gonna be vélo, vélo. The next is écriture, écriture. The next is gonna be dépasse, dépasse. As you can see, also this is another reminder. The S is between two vowels, but we put a double S. That's why we're gonna pronounce it as S and not Z. And to our last one, été, été. Now we're gonna talk about the E with the accent grave, which is the hard one. So if we want to write this one from the left to the right, we draw it in the opposite direction, from the upper part to the lower one. So basically, this accent can be written on top of other vowels and also change their pronunciation. But for now, we're just gonna talk about the letter E because this is the mostly used accent. The other ones are rare and are more specific, so we're gonna talk about them when we get a little bit more deeper into the French language. So this one is gonna be pronounced as A. Okay, so the first one, the aigu one, is gonna be A, and this one's gonna be A. Okay, so let's take first example. Lèvres, lèvres, lèvres. Second one, père, père. Next one's gonna be mère, mère. The other one's gonna be règle, règle. The next is gonna be frère, frère. The next is gonna be repère, repère. And the last one's gonna be lève. So, if you can notice the difference, for example, let's see, with the aigu one, it's gonna be école. With this one, it's gonna be lèvres. So, with the first one, it's gonna be é, and with the second one, it's gonna be é. Okay, we move on. Okay, so now we're gonna stop with our syllabic method, and we're gonna start reading each word as one unit. I hope you've practiced the syllabic method enough, and now we can move on to the next step. I'll give you a couple last rules, which are the letter H is never pronounced in the beginning of a word. So once again, the letter H is never pronounced in the beginning of a word. Let's take some examples. The first one, it's pronounced as haricot. So we don't pronounce the letter H, so it's gonna be haricot. We move on to the next. It's gonna be héros. You see, this is aigu. Héros. So it's gonna be héros. The next is gonna be habite. So it's gonna be habite. And the last one is gonna be hola. Only hola. We move on. Now, with this rule, we're gonna talk about that the letter S, T, D, P, X, G, and Z are always silent when they are in the end of a word. Let's take some examples. For the first one, it's gonna be pronounced ba and not bas. It's gonna be ba. The second one is gonna be petit, petit. The second one is gonna be accord, accord. The next is gonna be coup. We're gonna talk about the sound oo in a while. Just now focus on not pronouncing the letter P in the end. The next is gonna be long, long. Also, we're gonna talk about this sound later on. Chez, chez. Also, we're gonna talk about the sh sound. And the last is gonna be gant, gant. I've put these sounds on purpose so I can prepare you to what's coming next. Also, so now once again, the letters S, T, D, P, X, G, and Z are always silent in the end, except if we add an E after them. So if we add an E after the letters we just said, it's gonna be pronounced. Let's take some examples. Base, base, because the S is between two vowels. If you can see here, we pronounce it as ba, but here after we add the E, it's gonna be base. Next is gonna be porte, porte. The next is gonna be camarade. So in the end, as a whole, it's gonna be camarade. The next is gonna be coupe, coupe. The next is gonna be lo, je, lo, je. The next is gonna be axe, axe. And the last is gonna be a, li, ze, a, li, ze. Okay, so now we are going to talk about three new pronunciations. When we have the letters A, O, E, and I before the letter N, it's gonna be pronounced as following. The first one, the AN, it's gonna be pronounced as an, so it's gonna be as an. The second one, the ON, it's gonna be pronounced as on, on. The third one, the EN or the EN, it's gonna be pronounced as on. And the last one, the I and the N or the E and N are gonna be pronounced as un, un. We're gonna do the same thing we did with the first letters when we did the syllabic method, but now we're gonna practice on these pronunciations. So let's take our first example, the letter B. It's gonna be with the AN, it's gonna be pronounced as bon, bon. With the ON, it's gonna be pronounced as bon, bon. With the EN or the EN, it's gonna be pronounced as bon, bon. And with the last one, it's gonna be pronounced as ben, ben. If you've noticed, it's hard to differentiate between the first one and the third one, which means the AN and the EN, because they are so close to each other that sometimes you're not able to differentiate between them. But this is the normal way it is. This is more of a grammatical change than in pronunciation. It's it's just a slight difference between there's only a slight difference between the AN and the EN. I'm gonna do it with the letter B. So with the letter B at first with the AN it's gonna be bon. The letter EN it's gonna be bon. So it's just a little bit more with the sound A with the AN. So it's gonna be bon. With the EN it's gonna be bon. But don't worry if you can't do them really differently because it doesn't have a big importance in the French language to really master the pronunciation between these two because they are so close. But of course, we're gonna master how to write the different AN and EN in words later on. Let's move on to the next letter. It's gonna be quand, quand. The last one, with the second one's gonna be con, con. With the third one's gonna be son, son. And with the last one's gonna be saint, saint. With the letter C, just remember the rules we talked about earlier. Now with the letter D, it's gonna be dans, dans. With the O, don, don. With the third one, dans, dans. And with the last, din, din. You move on to the letter F, fin, fond, fond, and fin. So now with the letter G, it's gonna be gant, gon, Jean, and Jean. Also, this is a reminder with the earlier rule. Now, let's move on to the letter H, and we'll just think of this H in the middle of the word, because if it was in the first letter of the word, it won't be pronounced. So just consider it as the middle of the word. It's gonna be huh, hon, huh, and huh. We move on to the letter J. It's gonna be Jean, 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 and Jean. The next, the letter K, it's gonna be quand, con, quand, and quin. We move on to the letter L. It's gonna be long, 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 and lin. We move on to the letter M. It's gonna be mon, 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 and main. And with the letter N, it's gonna be no, 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 and no. Let's do these last set of letters. It's gonna be with the letter P, pon, 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 and pon. I'm gonna do those quickly and feel free to pause and to do them all again. But make sure you take your time with this so you get used to the different pronunciations of these different letters. With the letter Q, it's gonna be quand, con, quand, and quand. With the letter R, which is R, it's gonna be pronounced as rin, ron, ron, and rin. The letter S, it's gonna be sin, son, son, and saint. With the letter T, it's gonna be tin, ton, ton, and tin. With the letter V, it's gonna be vin, von, vin, and vin. With the letter W, which is W, it's gonna be pronounced as ouin, 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 and ouin. With the letter X, it's gonna be pronounced as xan, xon, xon, and xan. With the letter Y, it's gonna be, which is Y, it's gonna be yan, yon, yan, and yan. And to our last letter, which is the letter Z, it's gonna be zan, zon, zon, and zan. Now we're gonna start talking about the same pronunciations that we just learned, and we're gonna give some examples, and while doing so, we're gonna learn a new vocabulary. So let's take the first example. It's the word angle, angle, which is an angle in French. So the word's gonna be angle. The second example is orange, orange, which is an orange. We move on to the next. Plante, plant, which is a plant. And we move on to the last one. Éléphant, éléphant. We're going to talk about the F sound later on, but now focus on the en at first and then focus on the accent. We move on to the next sound, which is the sound on. Let's take these examples. The first one is going to be bon, bon. The second one is going to be ballon. So bon, bon is candy and ballon is a balloon. The last one is avion, avion, which is a plane. We move on to the sound un. The first one is going to be lapin, lapin, which is a rabbit. We move on to the next example, chemin, chemin. Also, we're going to talk about the ch later on. For now, focus on the un sound. So, chemin is a road. We move on to the last, dessin, dessin, which is a drawing. And now let's talk about our last sound, which is en. The en or the en is going to be pronounced as follows. The first example is going to be dans, dans, and if you've noticed, we haven't pronounced the letter T in the end according to the rule we learned before. The next example is going to be envelope, envelope, which is an envelope. And the last example is going to be tante, tante. If you've noticed here also, we pronounce the T since we have an E afterwards. So the tante is a tent. We have a few examples having both both pronunciations in the same word. Let's take the first example. Enfant, enfant. This is what I've been talking about, the slight difference between the en and the an, but don't worry about it. So let's take the first one, which is enfant. It's a kid. The second example is gonna be chanson, chanson, which is a song. But here you can see the difference between the an and the on. It's really obvious. Chanson. We move on to the last example. Pantalon, pantalon, which is jeans. I've put these words since they have a really close pronunciation just to see why we have different an and en, why they have the same sound. Let's take the first example. Tante, which is your aunt, it's spelled as tante, and the next one, which is also tante, is a tent. But the difference is not in pronunciation, it's a really small difference in pronunciation, hardly noticed, but the difference is in how we write it. The an is for the ant, the en is for the tent. We move on to also another difference, which is don with the t and with the en. It's a tooth, but the other one, which is also don, it has an an and an s. It means inside. Let's do a little bit of practice. The first one is gonna be vin. I'm just gonna read those and feel free to do them again. So the first one's gonna be vin. The second one's gonna be cordon, cordon. The third one's gonna be copain, copain. The next is gonna be devant, devant. The next is gonna be biberon, biberon. The next is gonna be sonde, sonde. The next is gonna be entend, entend. The next is gonna be mange, mange. The next is volcan, volcan. And the last is gonna be garçon, garçon. Now we have one last piece of exception to the rule, which is called the rule of MBP. So basically, all that it is when we have en, an, on, in, we transform the n to an m before the letters m, b, and p. Let's take an example. The first one is going to be pronounced as combien. So just like an on, the sound on, but because we have the letter b after it, we're going to transform the n into an m. So let's do the whole examples. Combien, bombe, pompier, pompier, compte, complète, and the last one, emmener. Okay, so this is just a writing rule and not a pronunciation rule. The pronunciation is the same with the ones we talked about earlier. Now we're gonna talk about a couple of pronunciations that we have mentioned before, but now we're gonna do a specific chapter for each. So the letters P and H, when they're together, they're pronounced as an F. For example, telephone, photocopy, or photo. We move on. Also, we have the sound sh, when we have the letters C and H. So it's gonna be vache, chat, chocolat, which are respectively vache is a cow, chat is a cat, and chocolat is chocolate. We move on to the sound when we have the letters G and N. This is a new sound, which is ny, ny. Let's take an example. The first one, montagne. Altogether is going to be montagne, which is a hill or a mountain. We move on to the next, ligne, ligne, which is a line. And the last one, champignon, champignon, which is mushrooms. Let's do a little bit of practice of all of these together. The first one is going to be alpha. The second one is going to be cheval. The next is going to be cachet. The next is going to be cigogne, cigogne. The next is going to be phénomène. Also, you can notice the difference between the two accents. So it's going to be phénomène. The next is going to be chèvre, chèvre. The next is going to be cygne, cygne. And the last is going to be hanche, hanche. If you've noticed, we haven't pronounced the H since it's the first letter of the word. We're going to move to another group of pronunciations, which are, let's take the first one. Now we're going to move to another group of pronunciations. The first one is going to be the sound OO, which is the O and the U after it, or in French, O and U together. It's going to be the sound OO. Let's take the examples. Poule, which is a chicken. Ours, which is a bear. And the last one, roue, which is a tire. You move on, the sound wa. I have two really important examples, which are the first one, moi, which is me, moi, and the next one is toi, which is you. So the sound wa is when we have O and I together. Let's take some other examples with the pictures to enhance our vocabulary. Let's take the first one, voiture. So it's going to be voiture, which is a car. The second one is bois, which is wood. The other one is toit, which is with a T. It means a roof. If you can see here, toit is you, but toit with a T is a roof. And the last one, poire, poire, which is this fruit. Now we're going to move on to two group of letters, which are A and U together, or EA and U together. Both of those are pronounced as an O. Let's take the first example. Jaune, jaune, which is yellow. Chaud, chaud, which is hot. Cadeau, cadeau, which is a gift. And the last one, chapeau, chapeau, which is a hat. Let's do some practice with this new group. It's gonna be trois, trou, genou, étroit, hibou, roi, soie, and droit. So this brings us to the end of our course, which was French for beginners. So this was our first course of the new series that I'm going to upload. Let's review the things we learned today. So first we learned the French alphabet and the pronunciation of each word, each letter alone. Then we moved on and learned to learn the syllables and their pronunciations, and pointing out the small differences with the English language and the English vocabulary and alphabet, of which you're already familiar with. Then we learned three different things, which are the different C, G, and S pronunciations and their rules respectively. And also we learned a little bit about the C, C, D. Then we moved on and we talked about the accent, which was the small line on top of the letter E, but we only talked about it with the letter E since this is the most used, and we said that we're gonna talk about the accent on other vowels in more advanced uh, classes. Then at last we learned about three different groups. The first one was the AN, EN, IN, ON group, and how each of those are pronounced differently. Then we talked about the PH, the F sound, the CH, the SH sound, and at last we talked about the NY, GN, U, OU, WA, OI, and O, AU, or EAU, and their different pronunciations, and we put a little bit of vocabulary in those, but don't focus on the vocabulary now. It's good if you have a few words stuck in your head, but this is not the goal of our class. The goal was to start doing pronunciations and start making sure that you know the differences between the French language and the English language. And that's it. Thank you so much. I really hope you enjoyed this class. And if you have any comments, any suggestions, anything at all, please leave it in the review. And also, as a project, I would really appreciate it if you could do the whole practices that I've left in this course. Do it again. Make sure to do this periodically so you won't forget things, and don't worry about it. It will be stuck in your head faster than you know it. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next course.